Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Therapeutic Thursday with me, John Quick. Some of you may know me now by, I hope. What we're going to be talking about today is I'm going to introduce the idea and talk a little bit about journaling, which might be a subject that many of you are familiar with, but I'm going to run through a few approaches, why we might do it, what might be its benefits, and so on and so forth. But first, I must ask you to like and subscribe as ever, and also to remind people that I'm also an aortic dissection survivor, coming up to 19 years, having had a type A dissection with a replacement aortic valve and a prosthesis, and then subsequently developing a type B dissection, which has been managed defensively with medication. And that, like for all of us, as I've said before, stood my life on its head, and I began to think about doing other things and different ways I wanted to spend my time and needed to spend my time. And so I started studying in psychology, as I'd always been interested in that, gaining some qualifications, working with organizations and charities, which has led me to where I am today with all of you. So hopefully I can bring both professional, technical and therapeutic experience with the experience of being in the trenches with you, as it were. So without further ado, let's begin to talk about journaling. So first of all, I'm going to try and broadly define it for you. And you will see that I'm going to try and not to make this a lecture, but there's so much information to put across that I will be reading from the screen. So bear with me if it seems like a bit like an auto cue and you can see my eyes moving around. So journaling is perhaps best known as the regular practice of writing down your thoughts, feelings, experiences, or observations, often in a notebook or digital format. It's a form of self-expression and can be used for various purposes like self-reflection, mental health, goal setting and planning, creativity, memory keeping. And today I'm going to concentrate for us on 1 and 2. So that's self-reflection and mental health, because we could talk for hours about this. So first of all, then, what might journaling give us? Why do this? Why do it at all? A question that might run under everything, and does for me, when I turn to writing something down, is what am I actually doing? As in, what am I doing it for? What am I trying to achieve by doing it? So first of all, it's a physical act. You sit down, maybe if you like it, you put on some music, you take the notebook, you pick up the pen, or you open a new document on your computer. And just by doing it, the ritual, which I'll also come to later, it can change the repetition of the mental behavior. And it can be both a break, like a car brake that can slow us down, our thinking processes, and also be a literal break, an arrest of that process. It's a translation of mind thoughts, which I think, as we know, can be so tiring, into another form. So it can be a kind of release valve of what I often call the internal gas of thoughts. It can be relieving, de-stressing, so healing maybe, to externalize thinking. It gets it out and it interrupts those loops of thinking. When thoughts are going around in our head, they can become very jumbled. One thought feeds another or confuses the last one. Others come in, and that in itself can be a key builder of anxiety. Starts to become a bit of a runaway train. What's going on here? I can't slow this process down. I think one thing and then another thing comes in. So the process of getting it down on the page can alter that dynamic. It's literally transferring the thought to another dimension, and it can start to give clarity. And though it's written, it can also be more graphic. You can draw boxes around the thoughts, or circles, colors. You can make headings which might be larger. And this is different to thinking in the head, which, whilst it may not exactly be linear, occurs in a kind of internalized, private, perhaps claustrophobic, me environment. Getting something down on paper at least gives distance. It kind of makes it more public, strangely enough. We publish our interior monologue, give it voice, even if only to ourselves. So I'm not talking about there that we literally make it public, but we kind of make it public to ourselves. You've also potentially made the thought that might matter, so much to you, more permanent. And I don't mean this in a negative way. So you know those thoughts that can sort of flash in and across and then they're gone, but they can be kind of annoying as they seem to matter. You can't quite grab them. Here we have more capacity to grab them. And you are in a way creating an archive, an album of the mind. So it can help to make thoughts more manageable, kind of creating a mind map. This can also make it easier to come back, for example, to a worry thought a day or so later. There is that concern in front of me, and now I can ask the question, for example, does that worry feel the same? Does it have sustained power? Or have I moved on, got over it? Was it something that just passed? So this enables us to get some perspective. Because I don't know about you, but one of the things I can be wary of in myself is a thought around an issue can feel different at 10 o'clock in the morning, at 7 in the evening, and at worst, 3 in the morning, usually not good. And that, it seems to me, can warrant attention. That also makes me think of the line that I really like: don't believe everything you think. So we might ask ourselves, out of that, so what do I really feel about this issue? Or do I have different responses to it? Perhaps even depending on my energy, my particular day, other demands, and so forth. Because if I have different thought reactions to the same issue, one might be outright fear, another greater bullishness, another I just want to deal with this. What does that actually say about the thought and about me? Okay, so now to get a bit practical. If you're going to journal, these are some of my suggestions. I think to make it a ritual can be positive and fun. It can be your place you go to, private and sacred. And you deserve that. Nobody has the right to invade it, and anybody who does by reading it without your permission is abusing your privacy. Okay, so then there's the matter of the medium we use to journal on. A phone. Well, I'd say not, as it encourages an over summarizing method and a tendency towards a note style. And isn't one of the points here that this is when we do an activity that specifically steers us away from our phones, because they get enough of our attention, don't they? So there are plenty of apps out there, and I'll mention a few. There's day 1, Reflectly, Journey, Mood Notes, Mind Journal. Some of you may have known those. You can check those out, and they have many add-ons. Like on day 1, you can add locations, photos, so it's very customizable. Some have mood tracking, like a kind of 0 to 10 thing, mood prompts, quotes, coaching. Some will have questions for you, some with cognitive restructuring advice, depending on the approach of the app. So the good thing there is you can perhaps identify patterns, and some of the apps will help to identify them. For me, a compromise might be using a laptop and a Word document, for example, or sending emails to yourself, myself. And it's true that these can be easier to archive in date order and then more searchable if you want to go back to them than, say, for example, a book, linear journal. And I do this often. I write an email to myself, particularly if something is nagging at me and I want to get it out of my head and see a strategy for dealing with it, or try to get some kind of a containment of the thought if it's mushrooming on me. And it's another way for me to ask myself, what's going on here? Overall, though, for me, and maybe it's generational, but my preference is for more freeform when I'm journaling. But I do admit, and hence I'm going to introduce in a moment, the written journal. But I do admit it can be a question of time and convenience, sometimes rules, does it not? But I like this idea of developing the ritual. So, what I say is treat yourself to a stylish journal. And to borrow the line from the cooking show, here's one I made earlier. And why shouldn't you? It's the chamber for intimate parts of your heart, your soul, your confession. And for me, I don't always stick with this, but when I'm at my best, I'm disappointed if I don't have a good pen. And don't worry, this isn't a product placement ad for Mont Blanc, but there's something wonderful for me about a bottle of ink. A bit, brings out the retro in me. And you're not going to convince me that writing with a pen doesn't feel massively different to a biro, just the way the pen moves across the page, the flow. And I find that creates something more weighty. I find much as I've lost my ability to handwrite anymore with computers, I do find myself more careful with my handwriting. And I find that slows me down and is therapeutic in itself. And it also feels like it's coming more from me. It looks somehow, more precious and cared about on the page. Okay, so when it comes to the writing itself, I hope I'm not going too fast for everybody here. I have some thoughts and observations. I think it's really important not to self-censor. What I mean by that is, start saying, oh, I shouldn't write that, I should write that. If you find yourself doing that, you maybe want to ask yourself, why? And who am I doing that for? Who am I actually writing for? Do I think there's some presence secretly watching me? The voice and perhaps the voice inside my head that criticizes me all the time? My conscience? The idea that there is an audience and it's my conscience? Or my idea of an all-seeing God who's maybe watching me? So if we ask ourselves, hang on, who am I writing this for? It might shine a light on how we feel we should feel what we put out there about ourselves and what we really feel. Another thing is, I feel, don't overthink it. Just get in there and write, which I know slightly contradicts my advice about the ritual of preparation, but you can still do that. The ritual soon becomes part of the process and the habit. But again, I think the main thing is not to overthink it. And if you do just write right away, you don't have to read it back. You can leave it, come back to it. You might even find that just writing it down is enough. Um, so now I'm going to do a structured example of something I do for myself and I do with other people. So hopefully you can see this. What I've done is I've written the alphabet down, A through to Z, on a piece of paper. So there are all the letters of the alphabet. And I might take a theme and say to myself, what is my mood today? Kind of way of checking in myself. And I start to fill in words against the letters. A bit like kind of, word association to get, which is often used in neuropsychology. So against A, I might put apathetic. Against B, I might put bored. Against C, I might put cross. D, drowsy. Now, I'm not suggesting when we get down to X, Y, Z that you find a mood word for those. You can sort of forget that. And by the way, this is a great game you can play, on sort of journeys or anytime, with friends and family. You can take a theme and just have a competition. The winner, how many uh, foods can you find according to the letters, or how many cities, or whatever. And again, even that's can be a fun thing to play with ourselves if we're like finding that we're having a rough day. Just break the habit and do something like that. But what I'm particularly saying about this, and I'll just use the ABC example for this, is having filled in my letters, what I would then go and do is take the ABC. So I had apathetic, bored, and cross. And I take those three, and to give myself a bit more structure, I write about those as my feelings for the day. So why am I feeling apathetic? What's going on there? What's at the root of the boredom? Can I pinpoint that a bit more? Where's the crossness coming from? My crossness is a symptom. What's underpinning that? So, I recommend that, something I do. It's quite, an easy, practical tool. You can choose multiple different letters on different days. And it's also, I think one of the useful things about that is sometimes when we perhaps start with journaling on a particular day, we go, oh, where am I going to begin? How do I get into this? And I'm a great believer in often it's the pebble in the pond. You throw something in and small, and then out come the ripples. So start with the detail. Um, so Joshua, that was my little speech about journaling.
I like it.
Thank you.
I want to drill a little bit into that pebble in the pond scenario. Often, when you're trying to get into behavioral changes, they tell you that it takes like 90 days, right? Like, no matter what you're going to try to do, if you're going to try to make a change, it's going to take 90 days.
Who tells
So,
you this, by the way?
I mean, this is behavioral studies. This is just a
Okay.
thing, right? So, when somebody's going to start something new to them, right? How do you create that on ramp? Do you say things like, If you're going to create a ritual, when is the best time for you to be alone? How long do you write for? You know, um,
Mm.
I, when you say music, that's an interesting thing because I can't concentrate with music,
Ah.
right?
Mm.
Because I'll drift, right? Like whatever the music is, I'll start creating whatever is happening in there.
Yeah. So, well, it's a very individual thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Some people need music to concentrate.
Well,
Um,
drown out the voices, right?
yeah, I'm not necessarily suggesting, 9 Inch Nails or something like that in the background, but it can be, I'm just a point, it can be quite kind of restful. I think it's just that kind of thing of setting up the me time. Um, I actually enjoy silence a lot. What,
Look at
what's
the
that?
camera. Look at the camera.
Sorry, I'm looking at you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't look
on
at
my
me.
screen. Sorry. Yeah. Hello, camera. Um, yeah. So, it's a very individual thing, but you're also asking about sustaining, aren't you, as well?
It's not so much sustainment. Um, I want to say that creating a new habit requires a certain amount of discipline. And
Hmm.
when you're trying to be self motivated, finding the course and having that self propelled kind of well that sometimes is dry, right? So,
Hmm.
if you have frazzled thoughts, if you're highly medicated, if you're lacking sleep, like those first little while,
Hmm.
how are you supposed to get grounded, right? And that's where that ritual comes in because that ritual is saying this is me taking time for me to help better
Hmm.
me. And
Yeah.
so, again, this is that behavioral change. So, again, when is it a good time for you to journal? When's the best time of day for you to write a journal? Some
Hmm.
people have nice quiet mornings. Some people have wonderful blocks in the afternoon. Some people are late night owls.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that, well, obviously if you're going to journal and you're self-censoring, you're doing it wrong. And when you said that, I was just like, what? Who would go to journal and then think, well, I don't want to put that on paper. Like,
You'd be surprised.
it defeats the purpose, right? And I guess maybe
Yeah.
there's an element of fear there. Like, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of sharing your thoughts? Are you afraid of somebody reading your thoughts? Are you afraid of what you might admit to yourself?
Ah, that last point I think is really
Mm-hmm.
significant. Afraid of what we might admit to ourselves, as though even writing it down to ourselves can be shameful
Mm-hmm.
because it like takes the lid off it, and maybe we don't recognize how much we've kept the lid on. That can be scary.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Um, I also think self-censoring is very subtle. It's like, I enjoy writing stories, and I know that's slightly different because I might be thinking about the effect and does that work within the story. But nevertheless, I think there are moments where I think, should I write that? Am I brave enough to write that? But I know then, of course, I'm sort of perhaps writing for an audience. But
Mm.
I do think that it can be surprising how pernicious and persistent that idea of different voices within us that are almost like watching us. It's like, you can't write that down, John. But I think we learn that. Perhaps that's the process. We learn to break through, I think perhaps to more authenticity.
Mm.
We start with once upon a time and essentially, and then we begin to tell ourselves the stories. But I think it is really, really key that we try to get to the heart of the matter with ourselves, because if we can't talk to ourselves, who can we talk to?
I like to say if I can't question myself, how can I question others? Right? And I feel like
Mm.
that's a good piece of humility. I'm not right about anything. I'm often wrong about most things. But if I say something and I can't poke at it, like,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Am I being guarded about myself? That's another thing. I'm curious to know how many people discover who they really are through journaling.
Mm.
You know,
You're also making the point, aren't you, that, if you've got a lot going on in your life or you're having struggles and things, how easy is it to be consistent with the journaling?
yeah,
Yeah. Um, it's tricky that because it shouldn't be a kind of it shouldn't create another prison, another demand. And yet I think it can be useful to build it in as part of our self-care. You're talking about self-discipline. We do in this aortic recovery process, which is a life process, we do need to develop some of those disciplines if we want to improve the quality of our lives across a range of issues, diet, sleep, exercise.
sunlight.
Yeah. So, and I just think, I mean, I know some people, perhaps are more comfortable with this than others, and some more comfortable with words. Um, but I've always found there's tremendous kind of therapeutic value in just, as I've stressed today, in getting something out of my up here, getting it down. It somehow kind of releases it, frees it up a little bit. It doesn't seem to dominate me so much. I don't like that feeling of like, and I'm sure we all know it, of when the thoughts kind of are acquiring a kind of dominant power. You can't get rid of them.
I can't remember who said this, but there was a quote that I've kind of thought about very often, and it is, "I don't know what I'm thinking until I write it down,"
Hmm.
which I think is weird, right? That to me, that's very strange. The idea that you're hiding things from yourself, the idea that you're not willing to admit things about yourself or what have you. And it doesn't even have to be about yourself, it could be anything. You're just being very guarded about your emotional state, right? And
Yeah,
what are you protecting exactly?
a strange statement because even as you're talking things, and the very fact that I'm thinking them makes them cognitive. I've been thinking, right, I must look at the camera more. You pointed that out to me, so I'm thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't need to write that down, do I?
Well, I think he
Well,
was
I could do.
saying, you plant this seed of thought on a paper, and then you explore the
Mm.
thought that's on the paper, and it is illuminating because it's like you said before. So often you have thoughts that just bounce into your thought and your head, and you just dismiss them immediately. Whereas once you put them on
Mm.
the paper, you can go back and reflect on that. And how many thoughts do we
Yeah,
disregard immediately? Like millions, thousands of millions, constantly, all the time. You know. And
yeah.
so, I like the idea of taking a beat. I like the idea of reflecting on things for myself. How many people consider that kind of behavior selfish?
Are you asking me that question, or
Mm-hmm.
is it's a
I'm
rhetorical
just
question? Is it?
curious. I'm just like, for people
Mm.
that are they don't want to journal. It's because you hear the saying, "I don't want anybody to see these things. I'm not willing to share these things. Who has time for that? What good is this?" And another one of my clients, they have a smoking cessation group, and journaling is a big part of it. And part of the
Hmm.
journaling for smoking cessation is, if you're trying to quit smoking, how about you figure out how many times you're smoking? And he breaks down the journaling to, a very strong practice of, where are you, how are you feeling, and what time of day is it? And he's like, I don't want you to, think about writing for an hour, but what I want you to do is I want you to take a beat and go, well, I'm smoking a
Mm.
cigarette on the porch at 4:30. I just got home from work. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm anxious, right? I'm
Yeah.
angry. And so you see what emotional state you're in while you're having these cigarettes, but also
Mm.
you're getting an opportunity to look back at what you're doing and say, wow, I smoked 9 cigarettes today, right? And then you get to look at another page and go, I only smoked 4 cigarettes that day. And you get to see the emotional bandwidth that you're taking on different days. And so,
Absolutely.
with
Yeah.
certain substance abuses, you have to slow them down. You don't stop them completely. It's just easier for your body to get used to less and less until it's not required anymore. Alcohol,
Totally. Yeah.
opioids, tobacco specifically.
Mm. And that's about developing the awareness of like, oh, this is what I'm doing. That's a driver. Look, I've smoked, I'm in this odd mood, so I've developed had more cigarettes rather than just doing it and having no awareness of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I constantly work in this way that by developing the awareness, my thing about getting the camera out, we then have the beginnings of the tools and the power to change it. And that across the board in relationships, whatever. Oh, that's what I do under stress. I
Mm-hmm.
react in that way. Yeah. Or
Right. And so,
I reach for a drink or something.
right. So that's building that self awareness,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And this is another weird one for me. How many people they don't walk around with a regular self awareness going on, right? And so more and more, we're seeing people in our society that are on the spectrum that don't pay attention to people's emotional state or their emotional state or what have you. And that's interesting, right?
Hmm.
Very often I talk about projection, right? Like somebody's angry. That doesn't mean they're angry at you. And that doesn't mean that they were angry before we started chatting, but that person's angry, right? And do I take that anger on? Do I be angry with them? Do I wonder why they're angry? Do I ask about their emotional state? And
Yeah.
all those questions will bounce through my head, but I won't respond at all. I will just calmly wait for whatever is happening to finish and then,
Hmm.
see what happens. I don't like to interrupt people when they're ranting because, sometimes it's funny, but sometimes they will come to a conclusion on their own. And you will watch the gas come right out of their argument and they'll go, oh my God, I can't believe this is how I think. That's interesting.
Well, again, and I've said this before, and I will again, and I use it all the time, is the underlying question in that is what is the anger giving them? You know,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, why become angry? Is that,
Yeah.
you know, and that's if that can be said calmly to somebody, if someone is going off on you with one, and you just say, "What's this giving you?" very calmly. It's very disarming
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because you put the issue back onto them. You don't take on their anger. You don't go, "Don't you dare speak to me like that," you
Mm.
know, or or you don't stomp off, or you just give them the responsibility for their anger.
Yeah. Yeah. When you had your alphabet up there, I thought it was funny how you went with kind of more negative emotions because you were like A, B, C. I was like amazing, brave, courageous,
Ah,
dynamic. And you're like, I've got anxiety. I'm a bit bored.
yeah, well, yes, fair point. And I suppose it can cut both ways, can't it? I mean, one could set oneself a theme and of like you know good feelings and do it that way, you know. But I just took a particular mood on a particular day,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't mine, by the way, today.
Can you be anxious and bored at the same time?
Hmm. In a contradictory way, I think you can be.
I don't know.
I think sometimes,
I think that's a level of hell designed for like the Department of Motor Vehicles here in the US.
well, You lost me there.
You go into these government places where nobody's there to help you expediently. They're there to burn 40 hours a week. It's irrelevant to them, how fast the mechanism moves. If
Yeah,
you saw Zootopia, you'll see the sloth that like he's gonna stamp the thing. Girlfriend that I had at the time, like I was laughing like a donkey at this. It was preposterous. I thought it was so funny. And later on, she was like, "Why is that so funny to you?" And I was like, "Because that's how people move in these places. That's so true. They don't care about providing a good service." And so you're there hoping to get whatever piece of paperwork done is done. It should be 10 minutes of your time, and it takes 2.5 hours. So you're
yeah.
anxious and bored at the same time.
Welcome to the modern world. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, do you have that word
The
jobs
where?
worth? Do you have that word jobs? We would call that a jobs worth. It's like,
Never heard of this word.
it's like where if possible they'll stonewall you and they'll say, in other words, my job's not worth that, but a job's worth is, they never
Uh,
move or helpful beyond their own narrow definitions of their job.
oh, that's called malicious compliance.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think United States is not the only country to be afflicted with that problem,
No, no, I
said
hear you.
said John diplomatically. Um, yes. But coming back to anxious and bored, I think being bored's quite difficult to define, and I was just kind of being quite, I hadn't really thought that through. But boredom, I think, can lead to anxiety in a different kind of way, where it becomes kind of like quite difficult to do anything. There's that whole thing, give a job to a busy person.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they find a way.
Yeah, and we can get bored out of anxiety because we we don't feel safe about doing things. So the anxiety begins to dominate,
Mm,
but then it makes us bored.
for sure. In your practice, do you often review journal entries from the people that you're helping?
What I would generally do is invite people around specific topic
Mm-hmm.
to document it, and then and we can discuss that, invite them to send it to me, and we audit it together. That's how I'd work in that way.
So it's a valuable tool for your gig as well.
Oh, certainly, yeah, especially if you're trying to help the client identify patterns of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
um, and help them to see to gain the awareness of the pattern of the behavior. So, like the example you gave with the cigarettes, yes,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I might use that, in many contexts.
Yeah, I've been fascinated with addiction lately. I don't know why, but food addiction is something I never thought about. And
Food addiction.
one of the people in the previous group was like, I'm slowing down my cigarettes, but I'm eating so many cakes and so many cookies because I just want to do something. And so the gentleman that runs the thing looks at him and he goes, "Listen, you have addiction, and what you're not paying attention to is it doesn't matter what it is. You will easily transfer cigarette addiction to food addiction, to sugar
Mm.
addiction, to alcohol addiction. Doesn't matter what the
Yes.
substance is."
Yes, which again kind of presupposes that we have to break into what's inside the word,
Mm-hmm.
and it's to do with usually some kind of a void, some kind of a hole. But yes, there are, there are generic behaviors, aren't there? And of course, food is hugely linked to emotions and anxiety. Some people, when they're anxious, will eat more. Generally, I'm speaking generally now. Some people, when they are anxious, they can't eat at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They can't, the whole diaphragm's up, they can't digest, they can't get the food down, they lose their appetite. How many people, when their heart gets broken in a romance,
Yeah.
can't eat? Or even when in the early stages of a romance, and the butterflies have come to play.
Oh, the
They
good
can't
old
do
days.
either. Yeah. So, do we have anybody saying hello today?
Oh,
Or
yeah, we shouldn't ignore the chat. Uh, Molly, Velda, and Christina have all said hello.
hello?
Hello.
And they're
Did
all
you
busy.
journal before you got into your practice? Was that something that you did early, or is that something that you found over time?
I think I've always been drawn to writing things down, and it gives me clarity, gets it out of my head. So probably yes.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
But I'm not, I don't swear by it, and I don't, I mean, maybe I should do it more. Um, but I know I'm not saying about this that we know is something you have to do every day, because as I've demonstrated before, it can be set the bar too high. I'm going to start journaling. I'm going to do it 7 days a week. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, a bit like going to the gym, it isn't happening. And the person's disappointed.
Yeah.
Maybe, start with once a week, get used to the feeling, get used to the process of summarizing, of going into the thoughts, bringing them, grounding them, and then see if you want to expand it from there. But I think it's a very personal thing.
Mm, I agree. I like the idea of using journaling as a plateau buster too. If you find that you're being caged in on something for some reason, you know,
Mm,
um, I think Hollywood has kind of taught us that, journaling is about just kind of like today's thoughts versus, what's happening with me, right? And so when you're not thinking about what's happening with me and you're just going over today's thoughts, you can externalize those things. So and so did this today. I saw a few birds that were very pretty. These are just nonsensical thoughts that you're putting down on paper.
hmm
Versus, I can't believe that bird did what it did right after I washed my car, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think it what debate. I think there's a difference between the sort of Dear Diary kind of
Yes.
thing that we, perhaps leans towards rom-com or something, um, and something which is more interrogatory, like I'm talking about here. Um, both have a place. I mean, I've often thought to myself, why haven't I kept a diary over all of these years? But would I ever really go back to it? Would I
Mm.
want, pick some of it up and want to burn some of them? Quite possibly. I'm not sure about that as a process, as a document.
Yeah.
So that's journaling,
Thank you for sharing.
and we'll close it there and wish everybody a happy rest of the day. Yes,
Yes.
like and
ABCs.
like and subscribe. Write down your letters. Yes, if you feel like it. You know, play the game I told you about. Names of films, names of books, whatever. Fun game. Okay. Goodbye to everybody. Please like and subscribe. And remind me to look at the camera. Yes, I know.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye bye.